the podcast was meant to make people feel comfortable. Like
Yeah.
it's just a conversation. It's nothing heavy. I want to know about you and about where you're coming from and your perspective, and I'm sure the audience wants to know about you, and so that's what it's about. So, Portia, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Can you just please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Portia James. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I'm also a wife and a homeschool mama. But I've been a behavior analyst longer than I've been either of those other two things. I've been in behavior analysis since 2006, working always. Most of my time has been in the Inland Empire, but I've had the opportunity to impact kids all over the nation. I'm the founder and CEO of Behavior Genius, which is a behavior treatment center here in Southern California.
Awesome, awesome. And what sparked your interest in behavior, being a behavior analysis?
Oh, I actually, I always wanted to go into a helping field, but I did not think I wanted to work in special education. That was actually on my not list. But I procrastinated while I was in my undergraduate, and I needed to very, very quickly select an internship during my last year of school. And autism, working at an ABA clinic was the only option that I had. And I actually live in Inland Empire, and I went to Cal State San Bernardino. So this place that I was working was all the way in the valley, San Fernando. So I was, yeah, it was crazy.
Oh.
But it was the only thing left. I was trying to graduate early, and I said, well, this would be good on my resume in case I ever, on the off chance, work with kids. And I fell in love with a little boy named Mark, who was non-speaking, and I just saw the way that he struggled, and not only the way that he struggled, but the way that his family struggled to communicate with him, to protect him, to understand him, to advocate for him. And I think I've always been an advocate since I was really young. I was always the type that would stand up for others before I would even stand up for myself. And then also growing up in San Bernardino County, I was born in Pomona, and I was raised here in the Inland Empire. And so between like my uncles and my dad and my brother, they've all kind of been spent their fair amount of time in the system. And I started to recognize that once I asked more questions to my family, I realized a lot of my family members, we have a lot of drug addiction, a lot of, I think, unmet mental and behavioral health needs, which is normalized in the Black community, where kids just don't get the behavior support they need. Right now, actually 20% of Black children get the support they need. So as I've learned more and matured and just understood more even about my upbringing and my family and the relation between how I ended up here and why it sparked my interest in the first place, what keeps me here is being able to hopefully keep kids out of the system through my work.
Yeah. Can you go back to the little boy Mark? Can we talk about the boy that sparked your interest? You said his name was Mark. Yeah, let's talk about him for a second. What was it that sparked something in you that wanted to? Yeah, what was it?
Compassion. He I actually had two kids, and so I had one named Mark, and one's name was James, and James was mean. James was mean. He was probably what back then we would have called higher functioning. He knew what he was doing. He understood that he was bothering me. He would ask if he was bothering me. So I struggled with that. I struggled with that child. But Mark, it was really clear he didn't have the language, and he had so much frustration.
Yeah.
And you could just feel the frustration, and then the helplessness that his family carried. They just didn't know how to help him. And I think it was that through the time that I was with him, I was able to develop a relationship with him where I really tried to understand who he was. And it's hard because I think a lot of times people don't take, even educators don't take the time to slow down enough to try to understand who someone is, especially if they can't speak. Right? If they're not telling you who they are, if they're a child that's not really, you assume that they're just, you put them into this category, right? And we have this tendency to just assume what they're capable of. And for me, I just felt like Mark was capable of so much more, but no one really took the time to figure out who he was, to know what made him laugh, and to understand the subtle difference between him being afraid and him being angry. And it
Mm.
was those types of like things that made me switch from where I thought I was going to study marriage and family therapy or a master's in social work. I was like, oh, I behavior analysis will allow me to be this up close and personal with my kiddos, and just to get to know them and their unique needs and the unique needs of the family as well.
Was this on a school campus, or was this in a private setting, home setting when you met the student?
I was helping him in his home at the
It's
time. I
home.
worked with kids
Okay.
in school settings, yeah, but this
Yeah.
kiddo, he was at home.
Okay. Okay. And your experience on and with working with teachers in a school setting. There's something a little about myself. I'm a assistant principal of special education. So this
Nice.
is my fourth year in this position. Right. So it's my fourth year in this position. Before that has been general education all the way. And I've been
Okay.
an advocate for like you were saying, advocate for students, and same with me. I want to stand up for the students that need the most help, the students with the most difficult behavior. Let me just help these students out. They need the help.
Yeah.
Then when I became an assistant principal of special education, it opened up my eyes to a whole different world, like a whole different world. And the school that I'm working at right now is the majority of the students, the population that I work with, are students with autism, and a lot of them are nonverbal. The majority of them nonverbal students. And when you say stuff like, they get frustrated when they you could tell that they want to communicate something to you, but they get frustrated, they don't know how to do it, and so they use other means to express how, what they want to say. That resonates with me because I feel like that is the exact same thing that I'm seeing on my campus. And the question I
Hmm.
had to you was that with Mark, was that on a school campus or at home setting? I asked that question because me looking for tips on, well, like I work at a school
Um,
setting. What do so that's why I asked that question was, I have teachers. I have teachers that, need help. I need help.
yeah.
My paraprofessionals need help. And so, in a school setting, when you're working with students like that, what can you say about that? How can you help a
Yeah, it's a
school?
little harder in school settings. I spent a couple of years working as the behavior consultant for Pomona Unified School District a few years back, and it was one of my favorite jobs because my master's is actually in teaching, and the
Mm,
emphasis is in behavior analysis. And so, what I was able to do, which was I think really unique for my field, is I was able to go into the classroom and help teachers develop not only behavioral strategies or positive behavior management strategies, but also I was able to help them set up their classroom with visual supports or breaks, sensory break, things like that,
mhm,
that just to help them to understand autism. I started with just the autism program in Pomona Unified, and I was later able to take on the entire special education program for that district
wow,
for a while. And I did all the teacher in service days, and I got to choose all the topics based on what the teacher said they wanted to learn, which was really fun. And so this is a really great question. I think that in schools, the reason why I say that it's more difficult is because individualizing behavior analysis is all about individualizing programs to meet the unique need of of the client. Um, in the classroom, IEP is also meant to be individualized. However, the difficult piece is individualizing for each individual student while also helping the student to be integrated into a classroom where there's sameness, right? Like there's
mhm,
routine and there's
mhm,
community. And so that's I think what makes it difficult. The best thing that well, and then also the other thing that makes it difficult is relationship to family is the proximity to family is not there. So getting
yeah,
the parents buy-in and things like that make it really hard. But I would say um, number one, consistency. Using visual, whether it's visual supports, it's really simple. Autism is complex, but there are some things that I think all of us, not just people with autism, but all of us would do better if we had. So, clear signals for transitions are really important for
mm,
kids with autism because it helps with the sudden change aspect. Even having like visuals that meet the needs of the learner. So we would have where most teachers have like the written schedule of what's happening throughout the day, but some kids are unable to read. So we made those visual and added pictures instead,
yeah,
but had the same schedule. We also were, for some kids, they weren't really able to, they were distracted by what was happening in the classroom. So we had to take visuals that were maybe on the walls and we had to put them on the child's desk so the child was able to actually follow just what was on their desk. And so I think that in the beginning of the school year is, I would say, the first, probably from August until mid-October usually. The
Yeah.
teachers
Even longer,
are
maybe even
still
longer.
getting to know the kids. Yeah, in
Hmm.
special education, yes, a lot of times it's longer.
Hmm.
And so that's usually when teachers are really getting to know their students. And during that time, it's really important that teachers think about how the child uniquely learns, and not just in terms of the IEP and how those goals can be run and whether or not they need a para, but also like what are some things that are just tried and true, either rules or behavior management strategies that can be put in place that would apply in general, because the consistency is really important for kids with autism. So that everyone in the classroom is on the same page in terms of how we transition, how we treat others, and also how we respond when a child is needing more support as well,
Yeah.
is important.
I'm in these IEP meetings, and you could tell that maybe the parents don't have they need more information. They
Yeah.
lack the knowledge. They lack that, they're lacking some sort of information. You can see that there's an information gap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how would we address something like that? How do you address something like that?
Ooh, it's hard. I try to educate parents about things that are not related to behavior analysis, because
Hmm.
most parents don't want to be ABA trained. They want to understand their child. And so there are resources, which makes it actually a little bit easier for us, because there aren't very many autism parent resources that we can provide outside of, whatever a parent can Google. But there's so many resources just on general parenting. I think also it's important to recognize that, like, helping the family to connect to the community is really important. And
Yeah.
so helping the family to tap into what resources already exist within the community that maybe we may not be, especially in a school setting, we may not be able to like be there with the child, or even refer the child to attend that activity or to be a part of that that space within the community. But one thing that my team and I have been working on is creating like a community guide.
Hmm.
So that, and this can be digital, it can be on paper or whatever. It's just so that parents know. I think parents have a hard time with what's the word, autonomy, and
Hmm.
being able to, even because there's so much information, it's hard for them to find the information that's pertinent to their child. When a child is diagnosed with autism, the doctor gives you a pamphlet and they're like, your kid has autism.
Hmm.
We're going to refer you for this, and this. They need speech, they need OT, they need ABA, they need, and it can be very overwhelming. And so what I've seen is either parents go into overdrive and they take in too much information, or they just take their hands off the wheel and they're like, listen, I just got referred here and I'm just going to, I guess, find out as I go what my
Yeah.
child needs. And so helping parents to connect to other professionals in the community is really important, so that they can have a rounded understanding of how to coordinate care between like their different therapies, their different providers. So, we have coordination of care as an obligation. And so we have to be having conversations with teachers and with doctors if the child is, seeing a doctor, or psychiatrist if the child is on medication, so that we have a clear understanding of what the child needs. But also, we point families back into the community, and one thing we're trying to build is like that guide, so that we can use the guide and say, hey, here's dentists that specialize in autism. Here's where your child can get their hair cut. They specialize in autism.
That's good.
Here's doctors who diagnose autism if your child needs a diagnosis, things like that. Especially in Black and Brown communities, it's so important for us, I think, to bring the resources to the families, because there's so much information out there that families have to go through so many hoops to find who's reputable. Uh,
Yeah.
so that's important.
You see the inequities when it comes to services. Like some people get all the services. Some families get all the
Yeah,
services. They get all the outsides. They get all of the services. And
yeah,
then some families just they don't get
they
the
struggle.
services.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't get the services. And that is a real problem that I see when I'm in these meetings. Is like, okay, and then I think, like, how do you help those families? What do and you're mentioning some good things. You're mentioning some good things about providing resources and giving them a guide, and those are great things. And it just blows me away that some families have all the resources and some don't.
Yeah, there's families who will hoard all the resources to themselves too. Like, there aren't enough parent groups or parents can even share resources with each other, or and not just resources, but like how to have a conversation with your doctor to make sure that you get what you need, or how
Mhm.
to show up to the IEP and ask for what you need. Because I've had many families who have walked into IEPs and just didn't even know what to ask for, even from the district.
Yeah.
Didn't know how to read the IEP, didn't really understand that they had a say in the goals, that they could ask questions to the speech therapist, or they could make their own recommendations for what they maybe felt was important too. Usually the families who have more services are the ones who have the resources to fight for more services, which is really, and the education and the understanding, right? These people know how to navigate the system. And
Yeah.
so you're going to cancel out people where, at my company, we serve 150 clients. And I would say that about 65 to 70% are Spanish speaking. And
Mhm.
so, in my experience, working with families who are Spanish speaking, they don't either know, it's the education too, right? They don't know really how to navigate our systems, which there shouldn't be so much red tape. It should just be, hey, you have a diagnosis. Here's all the resources that your child is entitled to because of
Mhm.
this diagnosis.
Mhm.
Here's the regional center. Here's how they can get, all of the different supports. Nobody's giving that to them. And there's so much gatekeeping that happens too, even between parents, and also from entities, between entities and families too, where, when you go to certain entities, they're not going to say, here's everything your child is entitled to. A lot of times they give the very bare minimum, and parents have to really know the right questions to ask. They have to know someone. They got to threaten people,
Yeah.
in order to get what their child needs. And those usually are the kids that have better outcomes, because those families, typically white families, have the audacity to press the envelope and to say, this is what my child is entitled to. Whereas, families who are used to being in lack are willing to take the bare minimum of what's offered to them.
Yeah. And then being the assistant principal with special education, the my knowledge is important. Like
Yeah.
I have to know what's out there. I have to know what programs I could, actually get, from the district. I need to know all of that. I need to know the ins and outs of that. And just being, this is my fourth year in, um, it's really trying to figure out, okay, what exactly can I offer? What is it that I could offer? So the knowledge of whoever runs the special education department is very important. They have to be knowledgeable, or they need to be able to tap into the right people to get that information to be able to provide that to families. And so I think that that's important as well.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, even just like something like a pamphlet that just sits in your
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
Any parent
Here
like
you
passing
go.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, because it helps.
Right.
It's like these
You're
like
right.
here's how you can get ABA. Here's speech therapy in our area. Here's ABA
Yes.
in our area. Even just like I would love to walk into a school. I have three kids. My kids are 16, 10, and 6, and I've never walked into a school and right at the front desk. What I would like to see if I was a parent of a student, of a special ed student, is I would just like to walk in and right on the front desk, there was like, when you see those boards of like, just take whatever you need, like
Yeah.
all the stuff is just
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
there inside of a little hanger. I would love to see like, here's speech, here's occupational therapy, here's, ABA, here's social emotional learning, here's a play group, here's a parent support group. Like just becoming, I think schools are the primary place for, like, they should be the resource centers of their city. Like
Yeah.
the schools should really be, and a parent should not have to go to the district office for this, because who wants to do that?
Hmm.
Do you have kids, John?
Hmm. Oh, I do. I have three kids.
Yeah.
I have
Okay.
three.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
you know what it's like not to feel like having to make another stop.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go.
Yeah.
I'm taking my kids to school already. If you could just send it home in their backpack would be great. But even if I could just, during a parent teacher conference, because or an IEP, because at the end of the
Hmm.
day, the parents come to the IEP to find out where their child is lacking, and
Hmm.
then they don't leave with resources on how to support that child at home.
Yeah.
And I think that is where schools can just make a decision to say like, hey, and it's independent, right? Like maybe the district isn't going to make the decision to do this, but if you have the autonomy as the assistant principal to say, hey, we're just going to offer, and also let's vet these companies as well. Let's not just go like, let's not
Mhm.
Google it. Let's actually
Mhm.
vet these companies that are reputable, good companies that at every IEP, we're just going to give the parents like a packet of like, we can't make any recommendations on what outside of school is going to be best for your kids, right? But what we can do is just give you resources. And if anything that we talked about today, you can do your portion of just looking into these, different things and seeing if your child can, because every child deserves a full-fledged interdisciplinary team. And it doesn't
Yes.
just need to be in the classroom.
Yeah.
And as long as we each stick to our own silos where there's no collaboration, then we're never really going to be able to wrap the child in all of the services that they need because the families are exhausted. They don't want to go find the information. They want
Yeah.
that information to be brought to them and they want to make sure they're not wasting their time. So if you had a recommendation and also you had a relationship with a family, they're going to feel more comfortable making that phone call. That no family really feels like making. Nobody, time is
Yeah.
important.
So how do they get in touch with you? Like, how do families get in touch with you?
Yeah. So, two ways. Most of our families, all of our services right now are covered by insurance, 100%
Okay.
covered by insurance. And so families with commercial insurance have to have an autism diagnosis, and all they need is a referral from their doctor to ABA services. And
Mhm.
then with IEHP or Medi-Cal, they actually don't have to have an autism diagnosis. They just have to have a social behavioral need and a recommendation from their doctor. And
Mhm.
if they just have those two things, if they have autism, it's even easier because they can just pick up the phone and they can literally just call us. Hey, I have IEHP. My child has autism, and we can help connect them to get a referral directly from IEHP. But if they have a doctor's recommendation to ABA services, it's easy. Usually, the doctor wants to see the child. It's much easier, of course, if the child has an autism diagnosis, specifically autism. But even without the autism diagnosis, for Medi-Cal families, typically they're able to just ask for a referral from their doctor based on their unique concerns. So if a district was going to say, hey, I think that you should be, look into ABA services, the first thing a parent would do is contact their doctor and say, I'm interested in ABA services and this is why.
Hmm. Can you take us through a typical day of an ABA therapist?
Yeah.
What is it like?
Sure. So,
Yeah.
typical day of an ABA therapist. It's a little bit different. We have a treatment center and we do small group social emotional learning. So there's like kind of two. So we do in-home behavior therapy, which is most popular, and the typical day would be. Behavior technician shows up to the home. They greet the child. They have a list of goals that they're there to work on. If they're familiar with the child, they know what those goals are, just like the IEP goals.
Hmm.
Like a paraprofessional, but in the home is kind of the best way to describe it. They spend 2 to 3 hours, sometimes longer, depending on the kid's needs, working on goals around social skills, play skills, self care, and communication. Those are
Hmm.
the four main areas that we work on. So, and really at our company, we try to emphasize being as natural as possible and not making it weird. And so
Yeah,
we just come in and now
that's
like, hey, this is
important.
weird. Yeah, it's important not to make it weird.
Hmm.
And so sometimes, we're able to go on a community outing and we're at the park, but we're working on making requests. So one of my favorite, I had my nonverbal child. We would go to the park and he loved the swings. And so I would pull the swings and I would say, ready, set, and he would need to say go in order for me to let him go. And that's how I
Yeah.
taught language. And so that's what we want to see. So usually, they're there, they're recording data, but they're playing all day. If they're a good therapist, they're playing all day.
Yeah.
I love when I get phone calls from parents that say, my kid loves a therapist, but I don't know if she's doing any work. I'm like, perfect. Let me just see how her data looks. And as long as she's recording data while she's doing that, then she's actually doing it exactly right. She's having
Yeah.
a good time, kiddo's having a good time, and we have data, right? We're running this as a science as well. In our treatment center, it's pretty much the same, except we're working in small groups. So we're working on playing games with other kids, sharing, respecting personal space. We have meal times, we have circle time. And so it mimics the classroom a little bit. It's a little bit more classroom style, but it's small groups of 3 or 4 kids. So those kids are learning how to interact with each other versus the one-to-one in home setting.
So as a classroom, go bring it back to classroom. As a classroom teacher, that sounds perfect. What you're saying sounds perfect, and that should be implemented in the classroom as well.
Yes.
This is breakfast in the classroom. This is how you open up your breakfast. This is where you sit. This is how you request things. This is how you move about the classroom. That kind of deal. If a teacher might not have that structure, what would you suggest? Like they might. What if they say something like, this kid's just too much. I can't handle this kid. He doesn't follow any direction. Doesn't listen. Where
Yes.
would you start? Where would you start with that?
I would start with asking the teacher what their plan is. Like, I think that kids who have behavioral needs require a level of intentionality that's
Mm-hmm.
difficult for teachers to give them because there are other students to
Mm-hmm.
consider. And so, but really good teachers, um, 10, 20, 30-year teachers have a rhythm. They have a rhythm where their schedule is so streamlined and so consistent that they actually don't have to manage the schedule and they're able to manage the kids, if that makes sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
I've been in classrooms where the teachers are very frantic and all over the place. And of course, they don't have time to deal with the kids because they're just trying to get through the day. But those teachers who have good control over their like classroom rhythm, the kids actually do better, first of all, just having consistency. But then when one kid gets out of, because all the other kids do better, when one kid is out of line and requires a little more help, the teacher is able to pivot, or the paraprofessional are able to kind of pivot and support that one child's specific needs. Um, so I would say like the first thing I would look at is like how that teacher moves throughout their day and see if there's any adjustments that they can make to just have better consistency so that they're not spending so much time managing the classroom routine that
Mm-hmm.
they have zero time to actually connect with the kids and manage behavior when it does come. All teachers manage behavior. Let a substitute walk in there. And then
Yeah.
it's a whole different ballgame, right? This isn't just in special education, but
Yes.
the teachers who run tight ships, the kids usually get in line, and then you have your outliers, but you also have time to deal with those outliers while the other kids are able to continue within the routine of the classroom. So that would be like the least intrusive thing is like what systems do you have in your classroom that allow your classroom to run efficiently and effectively for all of the kids. And
Yeah.
then if you need to deal with behavior, you have the space to do that.
And then when it comes to self-injurious behavior, when it comes
Mhm.
to self-injurious behavior, let's just say in the classroom, something's happening where a student, he gets frustrated, doesn't know how to communicate his needs, his
Mhm.
wants, and his way of communication is hurting him or his or herself. How would you address that?
Oh, that's a good question. So in behavior analysis, we have there's 4 reasons why any behavior occurs. So functions of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and I think every teacher, every parent should understand these basic things. So it could be occurring for a sensory reason. Child wants to escape from something. Child wants access to something, or child wants attention. Those are the 4 reasons why any behavior happens. So to answer that question, I would need to know why the behavior is occurring in order to reduce it. Usually in classrooms, what happens a lot is teachers respond to behavior in an effort to make it stop immediately,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of times inadvertently reinforces the behavior and actually makes it stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So sending your child outside of the class or giving a whole bunch of attention because you're just trying to, like a kid who cusses in class, right? Gets a ton of attention. Right? Like,
Yeah.
they get a ton of attention. And if that's what they want is attention, how do we not give attention to cursing, right? And so understanding first why the behavior is occurring. And I think to give space for a teacher to be able to do that, it's important to first also assess whether or not the child is actually causing harm to themselves. I see a lot of times where there's kids who like they might hit themselves like this, and they get a lot of like, oh no no no, don't do that, no stop stop, don't do that. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, is he bleeding? Is he giving himself a concussion? Is he really harming himself? We don't like how it looks, and we don't want someone to be hitting themselves. But once we assess the level of danger or harm that's actually happening, then we can handle the behavior without panic.
Yeah.
So I think like that's the first thing is like is that we use self-injurious behavior for even if a child is like sitting there slapping themselves, we call it self-injury. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth is like he's not being injured, he's not injuring himself. And then also the next thing is just to figure out what is that function of behavior? Why is the behavior occurring? And it helps to have a behavior analyst to record data and do a functional assessment to figure that out. But it's also possible for teachers to figure that out by their own observation and data recording as well, just
Yeah.
in terms of like how the child responds when you withhold attention, or how the child responds when you just, if you were to give him something, would he stop? These are things that would help us to understand why the behavior is occurring, and then from there it's just consistently holding the child accountable to, and the professionals in the room accountable to, a behavior intervention plan that strategically withholds reinforcement, whatever the reinforcer is, when the child is engaging in that behavior, and teaches the child
Mm.
to use functional tools like communication. So you don't need to hit yourself if you're frustrated. You can just ask for help. And so we always want to replace a behavior with what should be happening in its place. Otherwise, there's really no way to get rid of a behavior. It's kind of like um, alcoholics or people who smoke cigarettes, and then they stop smoking cigarettes, and then they start drinking energy drinks, and then they wean themselves off energy drinks, but then they become gym rats,
Yeah.
because they're not necessarily, they're replacing. There has to be a replacement
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
behaviors happening. And so that's important, is to figure out why is it occurring, so that we can figure out which replacement behavior are we giving this child to engage in instead of self-harm. And that's for any behavior, not just self-harm.
So let's go with any behavior. Let's go with that any behavior stuff. There's a lot of teachers that send students out because, let's say, cursing, right? They curse in the classroom, or let's just say that they're being disruptive and they're walking around the classroom. Um, let's just say they're being loud. They're
Mhm.
being loud, or they're not. They're talking to a friend that's right there, and they're being loud.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's send these kids out, and what do you do with that?
Yeah. Do they send them to your office?
you know, they do send them to let's just say they send them in general. Let's
Yeah,
just
they
say
just send you out. They're just like, and the reason why
in
teachers,
general, they send them to the admin's office. Let's just say
yeah,
that. In general, they send them to the admin's office.
got it.
Yeah.
The reason why teachers send kids out is because they're disruptive to the teacher. The teacher can't do their job,
Yeah.
and the other kids can't learn with that child. And the issue is that if the child desperately wants to be in the classroom and is going to be saddened, um, or negatively impacted by being sent out, then that's effective. If the child didn't want to do math today, then they got exactly what they
That's a
wanted.
good point.
Yeah. So
That's a good
sending a
point.
child out of the classroom doesn't give them a skill to use in the classroom so that they can be in the classroom, which is where they're required to be. So
Mhm.
you will always have to send a child out of the classroom, unless that child is like, no, 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 please, I want to be in the class. Like, please don't send me out. That's typically not how kids are at
Yeah.
any age. But you can sometimes work with other motivators. It's just hard in classrooms because, of course, if a child is cursing, you want to immediately remove that child from the classroom so that other kids aren't impacted by the cursing. But what it does, it removes, well, it removes attention, because if the child stays in the classroom cursing, they're going to get all this attention. So going back to that function of behaviors, if the behavior is happening for attention and you remove attention, then you might see the behavior decrease. But if at the same time they're getting out of taking a test, then you're going to see the behavior strengthened. And so there are some age old strategies that teachers use because of the nature, right? Like, if you're doing this, I have to send you out
Yeah.
because we're in the middle of a test, or because, and those are where it gets really tricky. Because if you have a child will learn to engage in the behavior to get kicked out of the classroom, or
Absolutely.
to get, like, my least favorite thing is suspension.
Hmm.
Because I'm like, most kids get suspended, especially in special ed, and they get to sit at home on an iPad all day
Hmm.
playing outside. So it's
Hmm.
like, suspension is fun.
Hmm.
If you get to do, like, I
Yeah.
would take suspension any day over sitting in a class doing things that are challenging for me, right? And so I think we have to really think about what we're teaching by sending the child out. What problem are we solving? We're solving a problem for the rest of the class, but we're really not solving a problem for that student. And
Absolutely.
that's where more specific strategies are put in place. I've had teachers that were like, no, if he does this, he's getting sent out. I'm like, great, send his
Hmm.
paperwork. When you send him out, send him to this other classroom, and this teacher is not going to let him goof off. He's going to have to come to
Mhm.
this other classroom with his assignment, and he's going to have to sit here and he's going to have to do it because this
Yeah.
teacher's going to make him, right? So just being more creative about like where you send him to and what does he get access to when he gets to that other place? What is his experience like when he's sent out? Because if it's a break, good luck. You'll spend all school year trying to really decrease his behavior. And that's when teachers, they're just frustrated, don't have time, right? They have 30 other kids or in special ed,
Mhm.
maybe 12, and just do not have the time and space to deal with this one child. And sometimes kids like that need heavier supports. And I'm not saying that ABA is always a solution to put, a behaviorist in the classroom, but sometimes it's just being intentional about where you send that child and what they're doing when they get there. So you get to go to detention with Mr. Williams, and Mr. Williams does not play. And he's actually going to have you do extra work when you get there.
Mhm.
Is a way to get the child to make sure that they don't want to get, it should be more aversive to get sent out of the classroom. Otherwise the strategy won't work.
I just feel too that if a student knows that they could easily push your buttons, if the
Yes.
student knows that if they raise their voice, they say a curse word, or and you react like, oh,
Yeah.
how dare you say, they know that they could get to you,
Mhm.
then they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it, and they're gonna control you because their goal is to control you. And if they can control you, well, then they
They
can
control
control
the
the
rest of the
class, they
classroom.
control everything, you know. So
Yeah,
and they're
absolutely.
smart. They're smart. They know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to control the whole board. They
Yes,
want
they're
they
very
want.
strategic. They're
Mm-hmm.
they're extremely strategic, especially not all kids, but like kids with higher rates of behavior. They're very strategic, and I always tell people the goal is just to be more strategic than them,
Mm-hmm.
be smarter than the kid, right? Like beat them
Mm-hmm.
to the punch, anticipate how they're gonna respond and what they're trying to get out of you. But I've seen so many. I think especially since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I actually started homeschooling my kids because I'm like, I can do
Yeah.
this. Teachers. I
Yeah.
mean, we have a different type of teachers, right? And the experienced teachers, a lot of them left or they went online during COVID, and some of them didn't come back. And
Yeah.
so some of them they were right about to retire, and they're like, this is when I'm just going to go ahead and go. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're getting a lot of like new. I'm finally I turned 40 this year, so I'm at the age where my kids' teachers are younger than me now.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really really crazy. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of these teachers are just very young,
Yeah.
and they just are learning. They're just learning, and they are the ones that show up, and they're just like very rattled, very controlled by the child's behavior, don't fully understand the child, and sometimes like are just like worried about the wrong stuff, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
cursing is hard. I get it. But there's some things that it's like I've seen teachers just yell at kids for like tapping their pencil or like just little things that kids will do to just get on your nerves. It's
Mm-hmm.
just be annoying. Kid stuff. And I think we have to do a better job at helping teachers to choose their battles and but to be like fiercely consistent with their non-negotiables,
That's a good point.
because otherwise you'll just be managing behavior all day, which is part of what leads to burnout for educators.
That's a big thing is the burnout for educators, and you see that online all the time on social media. It's all about burnout, and I'm quitting teaching, and
Yeah.
and if you're a young teacher, you're 22, 23, 24 years old, and you're on social media, and you see that like you know all this exit of being a teacher, like
Yeah.
it's not for me. That's a definite big influence on a teacher,
Yeah.
and then they kind of lose motivation, and they look around the classroom and they're like, yeah, you know what, that's right, they don't listen. Yeah, that's right, parents don't help out. They don't help. I
We
might as well
don't have
just
enough
quit.
resources. Yeah.
Like all of that, and so that plays a big role on this whole burnout thing. And burnout, I'm not saying it's a real thing. I'm gonna say that the demands on being an educator in 2025, 2026 is really high.
Yeah.
It's really, really high. And I feel like that's just every time I open my social media app, whatever, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, it's all about like, man, this
We
is
did
the
our job.
yeah, I'm ready to quit. I'm ready to
That's
quit
how it
this
is in
job.
behavior analysis too. And it's like y'all are tired of the kids or what's going on. My daughter, my teenager, she has a teacher that was her teacher in eighth grade, and now that teacher, she was actually in ASB. And so this teacher was like the ASB teacher, and she's a leadership teacher.
Mhm.
And but she taught a bunch of she taught, and then during that one period she was, I think she taught like English, and then during that one period she was the leadership teacher. But my daughter's always like, I won't say her name, but she's always like, this teacher posted again on her social media. Now she has a YouTube and she's getting all these followers, and all she talks about is how much she hates her job. And
Mhm.
I asked my daughter, I'm like, Amaya, how do you feel? You're not her student right now, but how do you think her students feel? That she is on, first of all, why is she even allowed to do that? Like, what district does she work for that she's allowed? I know what district she works for, but why is she allowed? Not that we can't voice our working conditions, and I understand that, but what does it say to the students for you to see your teacher use social media to explain how burnt out they are, how much they do not like their job? And she never talks about the kids, but she just talks about the job. And I just
Mhm.
can't imagine being a student in her classroom knowing that this is what she's doing, this is how she feels about coming to be with me every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd have no respect for her. I would
Yeah.
have zero respect for if I were a student in that classroom and I saw those posts. I was like, "Psh, no respect. I wouldn't want to listen. I wouldn't want to do anything. Like, you don't really
Mhm.
care about this job. Why are you even here?
No,
Like,
and
and
she doesn't have kindergartners. She works with kids who are on social media. Like these
yeah.
kids are, some of them follow her, and
Mhm.
it's just, and so she'll have like, and that's her whole like brand. She's built a personal brand around, I hate my job. And I just feel like, first of all, it's disempowering because if
Yeah.
you hate your job, you chose it and you could choose it again, right? I understand you got your credential and all that, but you can take your credential and go do something, whatever you want. We all get to choose our
Right.
career. But to choose a helping career, and I understand it's thankless, being an educator, working with families, it's thankless. Educators make all of the impact. Good teachers help us raise our kids. Like at the end of the day, I'm the parent that's like, how can I even help? Because it's because of you that I can even raise my kids because you're with them all day
Yeah.
and they're learning from you and your positive influence, right? But it's so hard to come by. And so I
Mhm.
understand the difficulties of it, and I also saw what happened, the decline of quality teachers, and quality support for teachers
Mhm.
during COVID and after COVID.
Good point.
But I think that if you came back that next school year, then it was the responsibility of the teacher to come back well. Because what
Mhm.
those kids experienced, especially in special education, but all of the kids, I know my kids personally, what they experienced during that year was they needed to come back to someone that could motivate them, that school even is still a viable structure.
Mhm.
Because right now, I mean, I homeschool my two youngest, and my oldest, she won't do it. She's like, no, mom, I'm already almost finished. Just like, let me finish.
Yeah.
But I don't even know if school is even, the way some of the teachers show up, I don't even know if school is even like a viable option
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
education, for social emotional learning, for safety, right? Like we don't even, and so it takes, and I kept my middle daughter in school because she had one teacher, and that teacher was the most dedicated. Now, it happened to be her last year
Oh,
teaching,
wow.
but she just gave it her all. And we were sad because it was a third, fourth, and my daughter was in third. And I was just gunning. I was hoping that she would be in her fourth grade. She said, actually, I'm retiring this year. So, we lost her, and I'm grateful that we got to have her. But she came back and she really understood what these kids lost, and to the best of her ability, she was going to make it up to them. Something she was going to fix something that she didn't break. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's what good educators do. They fix. Kids are coming from broken homes. They're coming from, some of these kids are not eating. These
That's
kids
right.
are in special ed, and their parents don't understand them. They're coming from single family households. We have no idea what these kids bring. When I worked for Pomona Unified, I had a teacher, who would sneak bananas, like fruit and snacks, and she would just keep them. And she's like, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but I have so many kids in my classroom specifically because this is the city of Pomona. She's like, who come hungry, whose families' lights are off, who don't have clean water. And the least I can do is have this granola bar for them in my
Mhm.
desk.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying break the rules and be unprofessional, but have the compassion to care for the community, because that's really what educators lay the foundation for the community. And
Mhm.
I think that if teachers really understood, so if you are a bad teacher, you're going to influence students, and especially for students of color, to just go in the direction that society is already, the system's already set up properly, the way that they're
Mhm.
intended to be set up to push these kids into the
Mhm.
system. And I do think as educators, and even myself as a behavior analyst, I'm like, whatever I can do to keep those kids from having to come into contact with law enforcement,
That's
that's
right.
what I'm going to do. And I just think, and there's not a lot of appreciation for teachers. Teacher appreciation is not enough. But I think that you do have to come in with your own intrinsic motivation to say, I love this work. I'm called to this work. And every single day that I choose to show up, I'm going to do it in service to the community that I serve. And it's easy to forget, but I think all educators and all helping people should have practices and people in their circle that remind them when they need to be reminded, because the impact, someone in that role could really make or break a kid in a school year. Um,
Mhm.
so important.
Yeah, yeah. I feel this. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, this wh- this whole thing about knowing your why. Like, there's this whole thing about like know your why, right? And that's supposed to be something that I don't know, teachers don't like to hear that, or any. I feel like that's so important, that you need to know why you're doing anything. You need to
Yeah.
know why you're doing anything. If you're a teacher, you're there to help. You're there to help this next generation be the best that they could possibly be. That's what you're there for.
Yeah.
You know, you bring up a lot of good points. And you mentioned this teacher who was on social media, and she was getting a big following because of being negative, right?
Yeah.
Like, what I think about that, I think that we all have this choice of what route are we going to take. Are we there to take the hard road, where I'm here to be a positive influence and put out positive things, and help as many people as possible? It's pretty thankless when you take that route. It's really thankless. You're on social media. I have a podcast. I'm doing these things, trying to be as positive as I possibly can, and it doesn't get as much love or as much following as if you go the other route. If you go the other route and you bash the whole thing, you bash the whole system,
Yeah.
everything about education, you bash it, and you bash it hard, and everybody loves that, and everybody likes that, and
Yeah.
everybody follows that, and you're just sending this negative message out that way, and everybody has a choice to decide on what road they're going to take. And
Yeah.
that's a decision that all educators, all helping people have to make, is like, well, what are you going to do? Are you there to help somebody? Are you really there to help somebody? Because if you take that road, you may or may not be thanked for that. You may
Right.
or may not be acknowledged for that.
Yeah.
If you're doing it to be acknowledged, if you're doing it to be, a pat on the back, look at me, I'm doing all these things, it may or may not come.
Yeah.
For sure, it may or may not come. But if you take the other route, like where you're, like I said, bashing, and people are gonna like that, follow that, share that,
Yep.
you're gonna get all the attention.
Safe.
Yeah, you're gonna get all the attention. You're gonna get all
Yeah.
the attention.
It's
So you'll make
clickbait.
all the money too on social media. You'll make all the money because you get the most views.
Yeah, and maybe
You'll
that's
get
what
the
she's trying to do. She's like, let me just do what's going to get me views, But I just feel like, I personally, I have a personal policy for social media. My personal policy for social media is, I don't have like a big following. I have like some personal, like moral things for me. I don't complain privately or publicly, so at home or on social media, about anything that I am not doing anything to resolve.
hmm
So if I'm posting about something that I don't like, best believe I am doing something about it. Even
It's
if it's
good.
as big, it can be from as small as like, um, whatever it is, like something small, or it can be as big as racism, right? I'm doing
Mhm.
whatever. I'm going to make sure that when I come to work every single day, I'm a part of the change. Can I eradicate racism on my own? Absolutely not. But I do own a business, which means I have power, which means I can hire who I want and I can treat people however I want, and I can just change things even within my community and my circle.
Yeah.
And so I really struggle with people who use social media to, I don't want to say vent, because I feel like there's a certain level of venting that's okay, but specifically to just air out with no actionable resolve. Like, we're really just here to complain
Mhm.
about, and especially when it's about an industry that you work in, because it says a lot about someone to show up every day to a job that they hate, if they don't have to do that. This person has other options. She has a master's degree. She has to have meet the qualifications to be a teacher, right? So she has other options. And so I just, for me, I think that people who do that do it for attention. And so I have a really hard time respecting people who, aren't saying like, I hate this thing, so I built this other thing, or I hate this thing, so here, we're all just putting one coin inside of the fountain. Like,
There it
all of
is.
us have that one dime that we're just like, this is what I can throw in, right? Like, for you to be making posts on your social media where you're showing like conversations being had with men who are incarcerated. And they're saying things like, I just wish when I was younger, I had somebody to talk to me.
Yes.
And that, like, it's not really about views or like how much that's what needs to be passed around, especially to people like us. Because when I see those things, I'm like, and this is why I show up every day. Every day
Yes.
my job is hard. Like, the team, the families, the kids, the responsibility, payroll, like, right, like every part. My job is 90% hard, and there's 10% that I just like, that keeps me, and that's the 10% is what I prayed for. The 90% is all the other stuff that comes when you get the blessing, right? Like, there's other things that
That's
come.
right.
But I feel like when I see things like that, I'm always like quick to share, because I know how important a reminder is. Because there have been times when I have been sitting at my desk and been like, I don't know if this is for me. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if I can take one more day. If
Mhm.
they don't want to see me tomorrow, come tomorrow. Whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
actually, they might not even talk to me tomorrow. I'm
Yeah.
trying to put my own in
It's
service space
real.
in, and so I know how important. But when I see that, I'm like, that's my little brother. That's
Yeah.
my uncle. That's my dad. That's what my dad needed. And so I feel like, and it just reminds me, because remember your why feels so cliche, but I believe that for me, the most impactful times when I remembered my why is when either a shared post, or breakthrough. Like, when I've
Mhm.
gotten to experience like a kid who is non-speaking who speaks, a
Yeah.
parent who had no hope who has hope now. And those are the times when I'm like, that is why. I can't always put my finger on like, oh, I got into it because I want to help kids. I didn't get into it because I wanted to help kids.
Mhm.
I wanted to make an impact. And when I see things like that, like what you post on social media, just in you're highlighting not all the positives, because I also I don't really go for a toxic positivity either.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
you highlight the hard truth
Mhm.
about what will happen if we all don't rise up to the occasion for these kids. And I think that, like, that's my why. And that's what
Yeah.
really, like, what resonates with me.
Yeah, it's that hard truth that everybody needs to hear.
Yeah.
I feel like I just like I'm always trying to be as truthful as I possibly can on social media.
Yeah.
Like, what is the truth? What is my truth? What I think is truthful? Because I feel like I can't talk about things that, say fake stuff just to get views or like. This is the truth. This is how I feel. This is what I think is important. This is what
Yeah.
I think that people need to hear and need. There are so many other accounts that talk about, let's suspend kids, let's get rid of these students with difficult behavior, let's send them away from the to the office, let's do all these things. You know, I'm not for that. I'm not for, what, if they're kids, let's help them. They
Yeah.
don't know how to do certain things, let's teach them. They don't know
Yeah.
about having good character. Let's show them how to have good character, right? Let's do that. They're kids. They're still in elementary school, middle school, even high school. When they're 18, they could, I want to save them before they get to 18.
Yeah.
before they become part of the system, before they could get arrested and put away for the rest of their lives. If I could teach them something from the ages of whenever, from zero, from TK to 12th grade, right? If I
Yeah.
could teach them something at that time, then I'm gonna do it. And I'm not about let's suspend them and all that stuff. I'm not
Yeah.
about that because when they turn 18, the system will take over.
It's true,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, like I tell people all the time, you get paid the same amount whether you have a good day or a bad day
Hmm.
at work. Whether these kids benefited from your poor or not, you get paid the same amount.
Yeah.
So number one, don't take advantage and come and do the least just because you get paid the same amount. Show up, but also why get paid for something and come to work every day to something and do something that you chose to do and not make your impact? Why have a bad day every day? You know, why, if you have to be there, and you have to deal with that 90%, why not at least make sure that someone was able to receive from your poor because
Hmm.
you're here anyway. So I don't understand showing up to a place where you're just not willing to make an impact. You show up
Yeah.
every single day. And I understand burnout. I understand being tired and exhausted, but like, all the burnout goes out the window when I walk into that treatment center and those kids run up to me and they're happy to see me. And not only are they happy to see me, but
Yeah.
they remember my name and they know how to greet me. And I know my team taught them how to greet or how to
Yeah.
speak or how to, you know, I just think that I think that summer should be for pouring back into teachers. Teachers who take the summer off, their hands off, and there's rest there. But I also believe that during rest, there should be pockets of refurbishing,
Hmm.
restoring, refreshing. And I don't think that just being away sometimes is enough. I think that there should be like opportunities during the summer for teachers just to get poured into, to have
Hmm.
workshops, to have, you know, and I don't know what teachers do for the summer. I feel like they'd be on vacation. I
Hmm.
don't know. I never
Sleep.
had the summers off.
Sleep.
Even when I worked for Promote Unified, I worked through the summer. And so
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like, but 3 months of, 6 weeks of time off and 6 weeks of like inspiration and just a weekly check-in, a meeting, learning something. Like, teachers need to be able to develop professionally as the world changes and as kids change and as education changes, right? Because teachers are bound by whatever's happening in the district, which are bound by whatever's happening in the state,
Yeah.
which are bound by whatever's happening federally. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot to feel helpless about, like we just don't have control. But I think also just setting aside time for teachers to get activated and to be poured back into, because I think that's what it is with educators and helpers, is that we're constantly pouring out and there's very little pouring back in. But it costs nothing to say, hey, let's get on a Zoom call every Tuesday morning for these last 4 weeks before we go back to school. And let's really like talk through, or let's have a teacher's book club and let's read about, how to be better leaders in general.
Yeah.
And let's come back feeling refreshed and restored, not just rested at the beginning of the school year. That
Yeah.
might be kind of cool.
Well, we're coming toward the end of the podcast. We're up at that hour mark right here. And before I end the podcast, I always ask my guests what are 3 tips that they could give to people who maybe want to be an ABA therapist.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Number one, do what you love. I wouldn't do anything out of obligation. This is not a job to just do out of obligation. Number two, have compassion. Bring it with you every day. And number three would be willing to be innovative, be creative, get to know the kids and do whatever it takes to connect with them, because connected treatment is really the best kind. We have to know our kids and we have to understand the unique needs of the family. I think that those 3 things they've gotten me through 20 years.
Well, Portia, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I greatly appreciate your insights and your wisdom. It was a good conversation. It was the first conversation back from, I took a few months off, and it's a good conversation to be back, so thank you for being my first conversation back.
Thank you for having me. I didn't know that, but I'm honored. Thank